He kicked down her door with a loaded Glock 19, his eyes screaming murder. Nancy thought she was dead. She thought the devil had finally come to collect. But when Lorenzo Moretti, the most feared Don in Chicago, saw what was in her arms, the gun lowered. He didn't see a ransom. He didn't see a threat. He saw his dying son breathing softly against her chest. They say you should never touch what belongs to the Mafia, but Nancy didn't just touch his life. She saved it, and his reaction? It didn't just change her night, it burned her entire world to the ground. This is the story of how a single act of kindness started a war. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean, it just made the grime slicker. Nancy distinctively remembered the time, 11:42 p.m. She knew because she had just missed the last reliable bus out of the meatpacking district. Her shift at Sal's diner had run long because the new girl, Jessica, had walked out, mid-shift, leaving Nancy to scrape burnt eggs off the griddle and close up alone. Now she was walking. Her nursing scrubs, usually a crisp blue, were soaked through within minutes. She pulled her thin cardigan tighter head down, navigating the puddles on West Randolph Street. It was a Tuesday late October. The air smelled of wet asphalt and impending winter. Nancy was 24, drowning in student debt. From a nursing degree she had to pause, and currently her biggest problem was whether her landlord, Mr. Henderson, would accept a partial payment on Friday. She didn't know that her biggest problem was actually bleeding out in an alleyway 3 blocks ahead. As she turned the corner onto a quieter industrial stretch, the sound of the city faded, replaced by the rhythmic thrum-thrum of a car engine idling violently. Nancy stopped. 50 feet ahead, a matte black Cadillac Escalade was smashed against a concrete pylon. Steam hissed from the crushed radiator, mingling with the rain. The driver's side door was open. "Hello," Nancy called out, her voice trembling. "Do you need help?" No answer, just the rain. Instinct told her to run. This was Chicago. Abandoned crashes usually meant stolen cars or gang hits. But the nurse in her, the part of her that had spent 3 years changing bedpans and holding the hands of dying veterans, wouldn't let her feet move. She crept closer. The driver was gone. Drag marks in the mud suggested he hadn't left willingly. But then she heard it. A sound so faint it was almost swallowed by the storm. A wheeze, a desperate rattling gasp for air. Nancy rounded the back of the SUV. Huddled in the gap between the vehicle and the brick wall was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 5 years old. He was wearing a miniature tuxedo ridiculously expensive, looking now splattered with mud. His face was a terrifying shade of grey-blue. "Hey!" Nancy dropped to her knees, ignoring the icy water soaking her pants. "Hey, look at me!" The boy's eyes were wide, glassy with panic. He was clutching his throat. Asthma attack or anaphylaxis. "Can you breathe?" Nancy asked, her hands instantly checking his pulse. It was thready and racing. "Where are your parents?" The boy tried to speak, but only a squeak came out. He pointed a shaking finger toward the darkness where the drag marks led. Nancy's blood ran cold. Whoever had taken the driver might still be close. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't call 911 and wait 10 minutes for an ambulance while a hit squad potentially circled the block. "Okay," Nancy said, her voice dropping into the calm, authoritative tone she used in the ER. "I'm Nancy. I'm going to help you breathe okay, but we have to move." She shrugged off her cardigan and wrapped it around the shivering boy. He was light, too light. Frail. When she lifted him, he didn't resist. He collapsed into her, his small head resting on her shoulder, fighting for every inhale. She looked around. Her apartment was only 4 blocks away on Racine Avenue. It was a dump, but it had a nebulizer from when her younger sister stayed with her last winter. "Hold on tight," she whispered into his wet hair. She didn't run running, drew attention. She walked briskly, sticking to the shadows, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Every set of headlights that swept over them made her flinch. She felt like a thief stealing a prince from a kingdom of wolves. She reached her building, fumbled with her keys, and practically fell into the lobby. She didn't stop until she was inside her third-floor apartment, deadbolting the door, sliding the chain, and pressing a chair under the handle. Only then did she turn on the light. The boy was fading. His lips were blue. "Not on my watch," Nancy hissed. She laid him on her worn-out beige sofa. She sprinted to the bathroom closet, tearing through boxes until she found it, the nebulizer machine and the stash of albuterol vials. Thank God she was a hoarder of medical supplies. She hooked up the mask, the machine humming to life with a loud mechanical brrr. She pressed the mask gently over the boy's nose and mouth. "Breathe deep, sweetheart, just like blowing out candles. Big breath." For 10 agonizing minutes, the only sound in the apartment was the machine and the rain lashing against the window. Slowly, the rattling in his chest loosened. The blue tint faded from his lips, replaced by a pale porcelain white. His breathing evened out. He fell asleep almost instantly, exhausted by the struggle. Nancy sat back on her heels, adrenaline crashing out of her system. She looked at the boy. Who was he? The tuxedo, the expensive leather shoes. This wasn't a random kid from the neighborhood. She reached for the boy's jacket to loosen it and make him comfortable. As she pulled the wet fabric back, something fell out of the inner pocket. It was a phone, a sleek, encrypted satellite phone. It rang. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. The screen didn't show a number. It just displayed a single word in bold red letters, Papa. Nancy stared at it. If she answered, she implicated herself. If she didn't, the person on the other end would keep looking. And men who drove bulletproof Escalades didn't look with flashlights. They looked with fire. She let it ring. It stopped. Then a text message appeared on the lock screen. "I know you have him. I'm tracking the phone. If he is scratched, I will peel the skin from your bones." Nancy dropped the phone as if it burned her. She looked at the boy sleeping peacefully, unaware that a monster was coming to the door. Lorenzo, Enzo. Moretti was not a man who panicked. Panic was for people who didn't have contingency plans. Enzo had plans for everything, for federal indictments, for rival cartel takeovers, for economic crashes. But he didn't have a plan for his son's security detail being ambushed while he was across town dealing with the Northern Irish gangs. "Talk to me, Dante," Enzo barked into his earpiece. He was driving his Ferrari 812, superfast, like a missile down the Kennedy Expressway, weaving through traffic at 120 miles per hour. "The driver is dead, boss." Dante's voice was grim. "Ambushed at the Randolph intersection. It was the Petrovich crew. We found 2 of their bodies, but Leo is gone." "Gone!" Enzo's voice dropped an octave. It was a terrifying sound. "My son, who cannot walk 3 blocks without an inhaler, is gone in a rainstorm. We found the car. No Leo, but the tracker in his jacket is active. It's stationary. A tenement building on Racine." "I see it." Enzo glanced at the GPS on his dashboard. "I'm 2 minutes out. Get the cleanup crew to the crash site. I handle the retrieval personally." "Boss, it could be a trap. Let me send a squad. If it's a trap, I'll kill them all." Enzo snapped, disconnecting the call. His grip on the steering wheel was white-knuckled. Leo was 5. He was the only thing left of his wife, Isabella, who had died in childbirth. Leo was sick, fragile, and the only light in Enzo's pitch-black existence. If the Petrovics had him, if they were using him as leverage, Enzo didn't finish the thought. He pulled up to the curb of the shabby brick building on Racine, mounting the sidewalk. He grabbed his Glock 19 from the passenger seat, racked the slide, and stepped out into the rain. He didn't check for cameras. He didn't care about witnesses. He moved with the lethal efficiency of a predator. He kicked open the front door of the apartment complex, breaking the lock. The tracker led him up the stairs. 3rd floor, apartment 3B. He stood outside the door. He could hear nothing. No crying, no demands for ransom. They are waiting for me. Enzo took a breath, centered his rage, and raised his leg. Nancy heard the heavy boots on the stairs. She knew with a sickening certainty that this was it. She looked at the boy. He was sleeping deeply, the albuterol having done its job. She stood up, placing herself between the sofa and the door. She grabbed the only weapon she had, a heavy cast-iron skillet, from the drying rack. It felt ridiculous in her hand. Bam! The door splintered inward. The chair she had propped against it flew across the room, smashing into the wall. A man stepped through the wreckage. He was massive. That was Nancy's first thought. He filled the doorway, his tailor-made suit wet with rain, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. He was terrifyingly handsome, in the way a tiger is beautiful right before it eats you. His eyes were dark, devoid of mercy, and focused down the barrel of a gun, pointing straight at her heart. "Where is he?" the man roared. The sound vibrated in her chest. Nancy didn't drop the skillet, though her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold it. "Don't shoot!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "He's sleeping, you'll wake him up." The man froze. He had expected a Russian hitman. He had expected a demand for $5 million. He had expected blood. He did not expect a girl in soaking wet nursing scrubs wielding a frying pan, shushing him like a librarian. Enzo's eyes flickered from Nancy to the sofa behind her. He saw the nebulizer machine humming quietly. He saw the small chest rising and falling rhythmically under a cheap knitted blanket. He saw the color in Leo's cheeks. He looked back at Nancy. He saw the fear in her eyes. Yes, but he also saw defiance. She wasn't guarding a prisoner. She was protecting a patient. Enzo lowered the gun inch by inch. "You..." Enzo's voice was rough, the adrenaline still coursing through him. "Who are you?" "I'm Nancy," she stammered, lowering the skillet, but not stepping aside. "I found him by the crash. He couldn't breathe. I didn't steal him, okay? He needed meds. I'm a nurse. Well, almost a nurse." Enzo stepped into the room. The air shifted. The violence didn't leave him, but it changed shape, becoming controlled, calculated. He walked past her, holstering the weapon in a movement so smooth it was almost invisible. He knelt by the sofa. His large, scarred hand reached out and touched Leo's forehead. He checked the pulse just as Nancy had done. He inspected the nebulizer mask. "You gave him albuterol?" Enzo asked, his back to her. 2.5 milligrams, Nancy answered automatically. "And saline. He was hypoxic. His lips were blue when I found him." Enzo stayed silent for a long moment. He looked at his son. Then he looked around the apartment. He saw the peeling wallpaper, the stack of overdue bills on the counter, the single cup of instant noodles sitting cold on the table. He stood up and turned to face her. The intensity of his gaze made Nancy want to shrink into the floorboards. "You realized who he was?" Enzo stated, not asking. "You saw the car. You saw the clothes." "I saw a kid who couldn't breathe," Nancy countered, finding a sudden spine of courage. "I don't care who he belongs to. He was dying." Enzo studied her. In his world, altruism didn't exist. Everyone wanted something. Money, power, protection. But this girl, she had dragged a target into her home, treated him, and defended him with kitchenware. "You have no idea what you have done, Nancy. Enzo said softly. I saved him, she whispered. Yes. Enzo stepped closer, crowding her space. He smelled of rain, expensive cologne, and gun oil. You saved him, and in doing so, you have painted a target on your own back. What? Nancy blinked. The men who attacked my son, they don't leave loose ends. They will track the car. They will find witnesses. They will find you. Nancy's stomach dropped. But pack a bag. Enzo ordered, his tone brokering no argument. Excuse me. Pack a bag, Nancy. You are coming with us. I am absolutely not going anywhere with you. Nancy stepped back. I have work tomorrow. I have rent to pay. You can take your son and leave, and I'll just lock the door. Enzo let out a short, dark laugh. He walked to the window and pulled the curtain back slightly. Look down there. Nancy hesitated, then peered out. On the street below, 3 black SUVs had pulled up behind Enzo's car. Men were getting out. But these weren't Enzo's men. They were wearing ski masks. The Petrovics, Enzo muttered. They found the tracker, too. He turned to Nancy, his face grim. You have 2 choices, Nancy. You stay here, and in 5 minutes, they come up those stairs and kill you just for seeing the boy. He extended his hand toward her. Or you come with me. You saved the life of Lorenzo Moretti's son. That means your life is now my responsibility. Whether you like it or not. Nancy looked at the door, then at the sleeping boy, and finally at the hand of the devil himself. Glass shattered in the lobby downstairs. Grab the nebulizer, Nancy said, grabbing her purse. Enzo smirked, a dangerous, fleeting expression. Good girl. He scooped Leo up in one arm, grabbed Nancy's arm with the other, and kicked the back fire escape window open. Welcome to the family, Nancy. The fire escape groaned under their combined weight. The metal was slick with rain and rust vibrating against the brick wall as the wind howled through the alleyway. Move, Enzo commanded. He didn't shout, but his voice cut through the storm. He held Leo tight against his chest with one arm shielding the boy's face from the freezing downpour. Nancy scrambled down the ladder, her sneakers slipping on the wet rungs. Her heart was hammering so hard, it felt like a bruise against her ribs. Above them, the sound of her apartment door being kicked in echoed into the night. Crash. Then shouting in a language she didn't recognize, Russian, Serbian, "They are inside!" Enzo growled from right behind her. "Jump the last 3 feet. Go!" Nancy dropped to the wet pavement of the alley. She landed awkwardly, splashing mud up to her knees, but Enzo was beside her in a second. He didn't look like a man fleeing. He looked like a general conducting a tactical retreat. "My car is too exposed," Enzo muttered, scanning the alley. He tapped his earpiece. "Dante, alleyway, north side, now." "We can't just stand here," Nancy hissed, looking back up at her window. A flashlight beam swept across the fire escape. "Patience," Enzo said calmly. A split second later, the screech of tires tore through the air. A massive armored SUV blacked out, and menacing drifted around the corner of the alley, skidding to a halt mere inches from them. The back door flew open. "Get in!" a man shouted from the driver's seat. It was Dante. Nancy recognized the voice from the phone call earlier. Enzo practically threw Nancy into the back seat, shoved Leo into her arms, and vaulted in after them. "Go!" Enzo slammed the door shut. The SUV peeled out the force of the acceleration, pinning Nancy against the leather seats. Just as they cleared the alley mouth, the rear window shattered. "Pop, pop, pop, pop!" Nancy screamed, curling her body over Leo. "Keep your head down!" Enzo roared, pulling a submachine gun from under the seat Nancy hadn't even seen where it came from. He didn't fire back. The glass was bulletproof, merely spider-webbing under the impact. Dante swerved onto the main road, weaving through the late-night traffic with terrifying precision. The sounds of gunfire faded, replaced by the roar of the engine and the terrified whimpering of the boy in Nancy's arms. "It's okay, Leo," Nancy whispered, stroking his damp hair, her hands trembling violently. "It's okay. Just breathe." Enzo turned in the front seat to look at them. His face was unreadable, illuminated by the passing streetlights. He saw Nancy soaked, terrified, covered in mud, using her own body as a human shield for his son. He turned back to Dante. "Status. Petrovits are neutralized at the site," Dante said, his voice tight. "But they burned the apartment. The girl's place is gone, boss. Firebombed." Nancy gasped. "What?" Enzo didn't sugarcoat it. He turned to face her fully. "They torched it to destroy evidence and to send a message. My everything." Nancy's voice broke. "My photos. My grandmother's ring. My nursing textbooks." "Gone," Enzo said flatly. "If you had stayed, you would be ash right now." Nancy stared at him, horror dawning on her. She was homeless. She had no ID, no phone, no clothes other than the scrubs on her back. She was a ghost. "Where are you taking me?" she whispered. "To the fortress," Enzo said, turning forward again. "You entered the game, Nancy. Now you have to live on the board." The drive took 40 minutes. They left the grimy streets of the city behind, heading north toward the affluent, secluded estates of Lake Forest. The houses here weren't houses, they were compounds. Dante slowed down as they approached a massive iron gate. It swung open automatically. They drove up a winding driveway, lined with ancient oak trees, finally stopping in front of a limestone mansion that looked more like a museum than a home. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. Nancy saw at least 4 of them before the car even stopped. Enzo opened the door and stepped out. He reached in for Leo, but the boy, half awake and groggy, clung to Nancy's scrub top. "No," Leo rasped. "Nancy." Enzo froze. His son had barely spoken to anyone but him since Isabella died. "He wants you," Enzo said, his eyes locking onto Nancy's. "Carry him." Nancy stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching under her cheap shoes. She looked up at the mansion, then at the guards who were eyeing her suspiciously. She adjusted the boy in her arms. "Fine," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "But if he spikes a fever, I'm blaming you for dragging him out in the cold." Enzo stared at her for a beat. A corner of his mouth twitched. "Inside. Now." The interior of the Moretti estate was breathtakingly cold. It was all marble floors, high ceilings, and modern art that looked like it cost more than Nancy's entire lifetime of earnings. But it felt sterile. There were no family photos, no toys on the floor. It felt like a hotel lobby, not a home for a 5-year-old boy. "Dante!" Enzo barked as he stripped off his wetsuit jacket, revealing a shoulder holster over a crisp white shirt. "Get Dr. Aris on the phone. Tell him to get here." "No," Nancy interrupted. The entire room went silent. The guards by the door stiffened. Dante looked at Nancy as if she had just grown a second head. Nobody said no to Lorenzo Moretti. Enzo turned slowly. "Excuse me. You said he has asthma," Nancy said, walking toward a large velvet sofa and laying Leo down gently. She placed a hand on the boy's forehead. "He's exhausted, and his airways are sensitive right now. Dragging another stranger in here, a doctor who smells like antiseptic and needles, will spike his cortisol. Stress triggers attacks. Dr. Aris is the best pediatrician in the state," Enzo countered, stepping closer. "Dr. Aris isn't here," Nancy shot back, checking Leo's pulse. "I am. And right now his pulse is stabilizing. He doesn't need a doctor. He needs rest fluids and monitoring." "Do you have a pulse oximeter?" Enzo stared at her. The sheer audacity of this girl, this waitress nurse, bossing him around in his own stronghold was baffling. But when he looked at Leo, he saw the boy was calm. He was watching Nancy with wide, trusting eyes. "Dante," Enzo said, never taking his eyes off Nancy. "Get the medical kit from the safe room. It has the oximeter." Dante hesitated, then nodded and left. "You have a big mouth," Enzo murmured, moving to stand over the sofa. "I have a patient," Nancy corrected, not looking up. She was busy unbuttoning Leo's wet collar. "And until you fire me or shoot me, I'm going to do my job. Do you have any warm pajamas? 100% cotton. Synthetic fabrics might irritate him if he has eczema, which often goes with asthma." Enzo felt a strange sensation in his chest. It wasn't anger. It was relief. For 5 years, he had been the only one worrying about Leo. The nannies he hired were too scared of him to properly care for the boy. They treated Leo like a glass doll. Nancy treated him like a child. "I will get them," Enzo said. For the next hour, the great hall of the Moretti estate turned into a makeshift clinic. Nancy monitored Leo's oxygen levels, fed him warm water with a spoon, and hummed a low, quiet melody until his eyes finally drooped shut. Only when Leo was deeply asleep did Nancy finally collapse back into an armchair. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaking and exhausted. Enzo walked over to the wet bar in the corner. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He walked to Nancy and held one out. "Drink," he ordered. "It's brandy. It will stop the shaking." Nancy took the glass with 2 hands. She took a sip. The liquid burned pleasantly on the way down. "So," she said, her voice small in the large room. "What happens now? You said my apartment is gone." "My job. If I don't show up tomorrow." "You don't have a job anymore, Nancy," Enzo said, sitting on the coffee table opposite her, leaning forward. "You are dead. At least that is what the police will think when they find the charred remains of your building." I can't be dead," Nancy panicked. "My sister. She's away at college. If she thinks I'm dead, we will handle it." Enzo cut her off. "But for now, you cannot leave this estate. The Petrovics know your face. If you step outside these gates, you are a walking corpse." "So I'm a prisoner?" Nancy asked, tears welling in her eyes. "I saved your son, and my reward is a life sentence." "No," Enzo said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He placed it on the table. Nancy frowned. She leaned forward to read it. It was a printout of her financial records, her student loans, her credit card debt, the late rent notices. "I paid it," Enzo said casually. "All of it. The loans, the debt. You are free of the banks." Nancy's mouth dropped open. That's over $60,000. "Pocket change." Enzo waved a hand. "Consider it a down payment." "A down payment for what?" "For your new job." Enzo's dark eyes locked onto hers. "Leo likes you. You kept him alive when my own men failed. You have a spine, which is rare." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark grounds. "I am offering you a position. Live-in nurse, personal caretaker for Leonardo. You will have a suite in the East Wing. A salary of $10,000 a month. You will have everything you need." "And if I say no?" Nancy asked quietly. Enzo turned his silhouette framed by the moonlight. "Then I give you $10,000 cash, a fake ID, and a bus ticket to Arizona. You can run for the rest of your life, looking over your shoulder, waiting for a Petrovich hitman to find you. Because I cannot protect you if you are not mine." The words hung in the air. "If you are not mine." Nancy looked at the sleeping boy on the sofa. She thought about the cold, lonely shifts at the diner. She thought about the fear of the debt collectors. Then she looked at Enzo, a man who was clearly dangerous, a criminal, a killer, but a man who loved his son enough to burn down the world for him. She took a deep breath. "I have conditions," she said. Enzo raised an eyebrow. "You are in no position to bargain, Nancy." "I am if you want me to stay," she challenged. "One, I'm not a servant. I'm a nurse. I make the medical decisions for Leo. Two, I want to be able to contact my sister. Securely if you have to, but I won't let her mourn me." Enzo studied her. He liked the fire in her eyes. It reminded him of Isabella. "And three?" he asked. "Three." Nancy stood up, her wet scrubs clinging to her, but her chin held high. "You never point a gun at me again." Enzo stepped closer, closing the distance between them until he was looking down at her. The tension was palpable, electric. He reached out his hand, brushing a stray lock of wet hair from her cheek. His touch was surprisingly gentle. "Agreed," Enzo whispered. "Welcome to the Moretti family, Nancy." He turned to walk away, but stopped at the stairs. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we go to war. And you will need your strength." Nancy watched him go, her heart pounding a different rhythm now. She was safe, yes, but she had just made a deal with the devil, and she had a feeling the cost would be much higher than just her nursing degree. 3 weeks. That was how long Nancy had been living in the Moretti fortress. In that time, the East Wing had changed. The sterile, museum-like silence was gone, replaced by the sounds of life. Nancy had bought Legos, thousands of them, and they now littered the floor of the solarium. She had replaced the heavy velvet drapes with sheer linen to let the sunlight in. Leo was transforming too, with a strict schedule of medication, a dust-free environment, and most importantly, someone who actually played with him. His color had returned. He laughed now. A shy, quiet laugh, but it was there. But while the East Wing was becoming a home, the rest of the house was becoming a war room. Men in suits came and went at all hours. The smell of cigar smoke and tension hung heavy in the hallways. Enzo was a ghost. Nancy saw him only in passing, a dark figure on the balcony, a silhouette in the library, always on the phone, always frowning. It was a Tuesday night when the reality of her situation came crashing back in. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. Nancy woke up thirsty. She slipped out of her room, checking the baby monitor on her wrist to ensure Leo's heart rate was steady, and headed for the kitchen. As she passed the main foyer, she smelled it, the metallic copper tang of blood. She froze. The front door was slightly ajar. "Dante, keep it shut," a voice groaned. It was Enzo. Nancy didn't run away. She ran toward it. She pushed into the foyer. Enzo was slumped on the bottom step of the grand staircase. His white dress shirt was soaked in red on the left side. Dante was hovering over him, looking pale, holding a towel against Enzo's shoulder. "Oh my God!" Nancy gasped, rushing forward. Enzo's head snapped up. His eyes were glassy pupils, dilated. Pain. Shock. "Go back to bed, Nancy," he rasped, trying to stand, but stumbling. "Sit down." Nancy barked, her nurse training overriding her fear of the dawn. She shoved him back onto the step. "Dante, move your hand. Let me see." "It's just a graze," Enzo gritted out through clenched teeth. "A graze doesn't bleed through a Brioni suit in 2 minutes," Nancy snapped. She peeled back the blood-soaked towel. It was a gunshot wound, through and through the deltoid muscle. It had missed the bone and the artery, but it was a mess. "You need a hospital," Nancy said, applying pressure. "No hospitals," Enzo said, gripping her wrist with his good hand. His grip was iron. "Police reports, questions. We handle this here. You don't have a sterile field, you'll get sepsis." "We have a kit," Dante said, running to the study and returning with a large black tactical medical box. He opened it. It had everything: sutures, lidocaine, antibiotics. Nancy looked at the kit, then at Enzo's pale face. She took a deep breath. "Fine. Get me boiling water vodka or rubbing alcohol and every lamp you can find. I need light." The next 30 minutes were a blur of focus. Nancy injected the lidocaine around the wound, ignoring Enzo's sharp intake of breath. She cleaned the jagged edges of the entry wound. "Talk to me," Nancy said, as she threaded the suture needle. "Distract yourself." Enzo looked at her. She was wearing oversized flannel pajamas, her hair in a messy bun, her hands covered in his blood. She looked like an angel of mercy in a slaughterhouse. "They missed," Enzo said, his voice low and gritty. "The Petrovics. They tried to hit the convoy on I-90. We put 3 of them in the ground." "Is that supposed to relax me?" Nancy asked, piercing the skin with the needle. Enzo flinched but didn't pull away. "It should. It means we are winning. Winning." Nancy tied off a stitch, her voice trembling slightly. "You came home with a hole in your shoulder, Enzo. Leo asks where you are every night. He thinks you're working. He doesn't know his father is out there getting shot at." Enzo went silent. He watched her hands work, precise, gentle, firm. "My father died in a bed," Enzo said quietly. "He died of cancer. He was weak. I promised myself I would die standing." "Well, not tonight." Nancy snipped the thread. "Done. 20 stitches." She began bandaging the wound. She was so close to him, she could feel the heat radiating off his skin. She could smell the gunpowder and the rain on him. Enzo didn't move away when she finished. He reached up with his good hand and touched her chin, tilting her face up. "You are good at this," he murmured. "I told you," Nancy whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I'm a nurse." "You are more than that," Enzo said. His thumb brushed her lower lip. The air in the foyer suddenly felt very thin. The violence of the night faded, replaced by a magnetic pull that terrified Nancy more than the gun had. "Enzo," she breathed. "Boss?" Dante's voice broke the spell. He was standing at the top of the stairs, looking at his phone. "We have a problem. The security feed. It wasn't a glitch." Enzo pulled back instantly, the mask of the Don sliding back into place. "What?" "The cameras at the south gate didn't just malfunction during the attack," Dante said, his face grim. "They were turned off. From the inside." Nancy felt the blood drain from her face. "Inside." Enzo stood up, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. "Who has access?" "Only 3 people," Dante said. "Me, you, and the head of security, Marcus." "Marcus has been with me for 10 years, Enzo growled. "Then Marcus has been waiting 10 years to sell you out," Dante said, "because the logs show the command came from his terminal." The realization hit the room like a physical blow. The fortress wasn't breached from the outside. The rot was in the foundation. "Where is he?" Enzo's voice was terrifyingly calm. "He's on patrol," Dante said, checking his tablet. "East wing, perimeter check." Nancy's heart stopped. "The East wing," she whispered. That's where Leo is." Enzo didn't speak. He didn't have to. The horror on his face mirrored hers. If Marcus had turned off the cameras to let someone in. "Leo!" Enzo roared, already sprinting for the stairs. Nancy was right behind him. They tore down the long corridor leading to the East wing. The house was silent, too silent. They reached the door to Leo's suite. It was open. "Leo!" Nancy screamed, rushing past Enzo. The room was dark. The nightlight cast long, eerie shadows. The bed was empty. The sheets were thrown back. "No, no, no!" Nancy frantically checked the bathroom. Empty. Enzo was scanning the room, his gun drawn. He had pulled a backup piece from his ankle holster. "Clear the floor," he ordered Dante, who had just caught up. "Find Marcus. Use lethal force." Nancy spotted something on the floor near the window. It was Leo's inhaler. She picked it up. It was crushed. A heavy boot had stepped on it. "Enzo." Nancy held up the shattered plastic. "They took him." A sound came from the balcony, a heavy thud. Enzo kicked the balcony doors open. The storm outside had picked up again. Rain lashed against the stone terrace. There at the edge of the balcony stood a figure, a massive man in a security uniform. Marcus. He was holding Leo by the back of his pajama shirt, dangling the boy over the edge of the railing. It was a 3-story drop to the concrete patio below. "Don't move, Moretti!" Marcus screamed over the wind. "Take one step and the boy flies." Leo was crying, kicking his legs, his face pale with terror. "Papa Nancy!" Enzo froze. For the first time, Nancy saw the great Lorenzo Moretti tremble. The gun in his hand was useless. If he shot Marcus, the man would fall, and he would take Leo with him. "Why, Marcus?" Enzo shouted, his voice cracking. "I treated you like a brother. The Petrovics pay better." Marcus spat back. 10 million, Enzo. Enough to retire in the Maldives. They don't want the boy dead, they just want you broken. But if you don't drop the gun, I'll give them a broken heir instead. "Okay," Enzo said slowly, lowering the gun to the ground. "Okay, let him go. Take me." "I'm taking both," Marcus sneered. He began to back away toward a ladder that had been propped against the side of the house, the escape route. Nancy's mind was racing. She looked at Leo. He was wheezing. The stress was triggering an attack. Without his inhaler in this cold rain, his lungs were tightening by the second. If Marcus didn't drop him, the asthma would kill him before they even reached the car. She looked at Enzo. He was powerless. She looked at the table on the balcony. There was a heavy crystal pitcher of water she had left there earlier. Nancy didn't think. She didn't calculate. She just moved. "Marcus, please!" she shrieked, throwing her hands up and stepping forward, intentionally looking hysterical. "He's having an attack. Look at him. He's turning blue. He's dead weight to you if he can't breathe." Marcus blinked, distracted for a split second by the screaming woman. He glanced down at the boy. Leo was limp, gasping for air. "He dies, you don't get paid!" Nancy yelled, inching closer to the table. "The Petrovics want a live hostage right. A dead kid is worth 0. It was a gamble, a horrific gamble. But it made Marcus hesitate. "Shut up," Marcus yelled at her. "Let me give him the inhaler," Nancy pleaded, reaching into her pocket and pulling out a spare inhaler she always kept on her person. "Just let him breathe, then take him, please." She tossed the inhaler toward Marcus. It was a terrible throw. It landed near his feet. Reflexively, greedily, Marcus shifted his weight to kick it away. That was the moment. Nancy grabbed the heavy crystal pitcher and lunged. She didn't throw it. She swung it like a club with both hands, putting every ounce of her fear and rage into the motion. Crack! The heavy crystal connected with the side of Marcus's head with a sickening sound. Marcus's eyes rolled back. His grip loosened. He crumpled backward. But as he fell, his hand snagged Leo's shirt. "No!" Enzo lunged. Leo was dragged over the railing. Enzo threw himself over the stone banister, his hand shooting out into the dark void. Nancy screamed, rushing to the edge. There, dangling in the rain, was Enzo. He was hanging upside down, his legs hooked precariously through the stone balusters of the railing. And in his hand, gripping by the wrist, was Leo. Marcus was gone, a dark heap on the patio 3 stories down. "Pull us up!" Enzo grunted, his face red with exertion, the stitches in his shoulder surely ripping apart. Nancy grabbed Enzo's belt. Dante, who had just burst onto the balcony, grabbed Enzo's other leg. "Heave!" Dante yelled. Together they dragged them back. Enzo hauled Leo up and over the railing, collapsing onto the wet stone floor of the balcony. Leo was gasping, fighting for air. Nancy was on him instantly, jamming the spare inhaler into his mouth. "Breathe, baby, breathe," she sobbed. Enzo rolled onto his back, clutching his bleeding shoulder. He looked at Nancy. She was soaked, crying, and holding his son like he was the only thing that mattered in the universe. He had seen men kill for money. He had seen men kill for power. But he had never seen anyone risk their soul just to save a child who wasn't even hers. Dante looked over the railing at the body below, Marcus's dead boss. "Good," Enzo whispered, his eyes never leaving Nancy. "Because if he wasn't, I would have killed him slowly." He reached out and took Nancy's hand. His grip was bloody but warm. "You saved us," Enzo said, his voice filled with a raw awe. Nancy looked at him, her eyes fierce. "You need more stitches, Moretti." Enzo laughed, a genuine, breathless laugh. "Whatever you say, nurse." But the night wasn't over. As they sat there in the rain, Dante's phone buzzed. He answered it, and his face went white. "Boss," Dante said softly. "Check the news." Enzo frowned. He pulled out his own phone. There on the screen was a live news report. A reporter was standing in front of a burning warehouse, one of Enzo's main distribution centers. But that wasn't the headline. The headline read, "Anonymous tip reveals location of Moretti's secret son." They showed a photo. A grainy, long-distance photo, taken weeks ago, of Leo playing in the park with his nanny, and then they showed a digital rendering of the Moretti estate. "The whole world knows he's here," Enzo whispered. "Marcus sent the data before he died." The war wasn't just at the door anymore. The door was off the hinges. The news report was the match that lit the fuse. Within an hour, the quiet streets of Lake Forest were swarming, not with police but with shadows. The Petrovich crime family had mobilized every asset they had. They smelled blood in the water. Inside the estate, however, there was no panic. There was a terrifying stillness. Enzo stood in the center of the library, buttoning a fresh shirt over his bandages. He looked at Nancy, who was sitting on the leather sofa, holding Leo's hand. The boy was calm now, clutching a new Lego set Nancy had salvaged from the playroom. "They are coming," Enzo said. It wasn't a question. "How many?" Nancy asked. She surprised herself with how steady her voice was. "All of them," Enzo replied. "Ivan Petrovich is arrogant. He thinks I am wounded. He thinks my house is compromised. He thinks he can end the Moretti bloodline tonight and claim Chicago by sunrise." Enzo walked over to a bookshelf and pulled a specific book, The Art of War. The shelf clicked and swung open, revealing a wall of monitors and a heavy steel door. "A panic room." "Take Leo," Enzo ordered. "Go inside. The walls are reinforced titanium. Independent air supply. If the house burns down, that room will still be standing." Nancy stood up, but she didn't move toward the safe room. She moved toward Enzo. "And where will you be?" "I will be in the foyer," Enzo said, checking the magazine of his pistol. "Waiting to welcome our guests." "You're injured," Nancy argued, her hand finding his arm. "You can't fight an army alone." Enzo looked at her. For the first time, he smiled a genuine wolfish smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "Who said I was alone?" The attack began at 3 a.m. It started with the gate. A demolition charge blew the iron bars off their hinges. 3 armored trucks roared up the driveway, smashing through the fountain in the center of the courtyard. Men poured out. Dozens of them. Heavily armed, wearing tactical gear. Leading them was Ivan Petrovich himself, a man with a scarred face and a reputation for brutality that rivaled Enzo's. They breached the front door with a battering ram. Boom! The heavy oak doors splintered. Ivan marched into the grand foyer, flanked by 10 of his best killers. He expected resistance. He expected a shootout. Instead, he found silence. The foyer was dimly lit. Standing at the top of the grand staircase, looking down like a king surveying his subjects, was Enzo Moretti. He held a glass of whiskey in one hand and nothing in the other. "Ivan!" Enzo called out, his voice echoing off the marble. "You didn't wipe your feet." Ivan laughed, a harsh, grating sound. He raised his assault rifle. "It's over, Enzo," Ivan shouted. "Your security is dead. Your walls are breached. Your rat Marcus told us everything before he went splat. Give us the boy, and I'll make your death quick." Enzo took a sip of his drink. Marcus was a disappointment, but he was useful. "Useful," Ivan sneered. "He gave us the keys to your kingdom." "No," Enzo said calmly. "He gave you the address to your grave." Enzo snapped his fingers. Suddenly the lights in the foyer blazed to blinding brightness. The men flanking Ivan, his own elite guard, suddenly turned. In unison, 10 rifles swung away from Enzo and pointed directly at Ivan's head. Ivan froze. The blood drained from his face. He looked left, then right. His own lieutenants, his own soldiers were holding him at gunpoint. "What is this?" Ivan whispered. "You pay your men well, Ivan," Enzo said, descending the stairs slowly, step by step. "But I pay them better. You see, while you were planning a siege, I was buying your payroll. Marcus didn't leak the info because he was a traitor. He leaked it because I let him. I needed you all in one place." Enzo reached the bottom of the stairs. He walked right up to Ivan, who was trembling with rage and fear. "You thought I was weak because I have a sick son," Enzo said softly. "You thought I was distracted." Enzo smashed his whiskey glass against Ivan's head. The Petrovic boss crumpled to his knees. "But a father protecting his child is not weak, Ivan. He is the most dangerous thing on God's green earth." Enzo turned to the treacherous guards. "Take him to the basement. I'll deal with him later." As Ivan was dragged away, screaming, the steel door of the library opened. Nancy stepped out. She had been watching on the monitors. She had seen everything. She saw the violence, the power, the absolute control Enzo had over his world. She walked into the foyer. The guards, Enzo's new soldiers, parted for her respectfully. Enzo turned to face her. His shirt was spotless. He looked tired but victorious. "Is Leo safe?" Enzo asked immediately. "He's playing with his Legos," Nancy said. She walked up to him. "He didn't hear a thing." Enzo let out a long breath. He reached out and took Nancy's hands. "It is done," he said. "The Petrovics are finished. No one will ever touch you or him again." Nancy looked at the broken door, then at the blood on the floor where Ivan had fallen. This was a dark world, a dangerous world. But looking at Enzo, she realized she didn't want to leave. She didn't want to go back to the diner, to the lonely apartment, to the life of fear and debt. She had saved the king's son. And in return, the king had burned the world for her. "You need to fix the door," Nancy said, a small smile playing on her lips. "It's drafty." Enzo chuckled, pulling her close. He kissed her forehead, then her lips, a promise sealed in the aftermath of war. "I'll buy a new door," Enzo whispered against her mouth. "I'll buy a new house. I'll buy the whole damn city if that's what you want." "Just the door is fine," Nancy whispered back. "And maybe a raise." Done. 6 months later, the rumors in Chicago had changed. They didn't talk about the sick boy anymore. They talked about the Don's wife. They said she was the only one who could calm his temper. They said she carried the air in her arms through a storm. They said that night when she opened her door to a monster, she didn't just save a life. she became the queen. And that is how a single act of kindness in a rainy alleyway toppled a crime empire and created a legend. Nancy didn't just save a boy. She saved the soul of a man who had forgotten how to love. It proves that sometimes the strongest weapon isn't a gun, it's compassion. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes romance, betrayal, and justice served, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. I post new drama narrations every week. What did you think of Enzo's trap at the end? Would you have forgiven him for putting you in danger? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.